investors should understand that even if you found an ore deposit tomorrow, it's going to take you 10 to 15 years to put it into production. So this is a long-term kind of operation. And it all depends on what the commodity is that you're talking about. Because we've got all of these metals that we need for alternative energy. And silver and copper, of course, are the two most important ones volumetrically. We need small amounts of specialty metals, and obviously we need a fair amount of lithium for batteries and things like that. But none of the energy transmission, none of the computers and things like that make alternative energy work without silver and copper. So the demand for those is going to remain and it's going to get better. And it's a question whether the world can keep up with that kind of demand.
As a leader in uranium discovery in Argentina, Blue Sky Uranium is focused on advancing a rapidly growing portfolio of uranium-vanadium projects into low-cost production, while respecting the environment, communities, and cultures in which they work.
Welcome to Hunting Hidden Treasures, brought to you by stockpulse.com. Look into the mineral hunt here, and I've got Dr. Peter Megaw joining me. And Dr. Megaw, certainly appreciate it. You're the guy we're looking for here to talk about these hunting hidden treasures, and you've been in the game a while. So, Dr. Megaw, appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, pleasure to be with you here this morning, Rob, or whatever time of day you broadcast this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll get out there. This is nothing really pertinent news here. That's not what this is about. But I want to go back to the start, and I'll go with Peter here. But let's talk about what drives the passion here. I heard your daughter here at our symposium, and I heard how she got in the game. A lot of table talk, and so how did Dr. Peter Megaw get his start in this business?
Well, like many geologists, geology found me. You don't get a whole lot of exposure to geology in your basic education. And I was sort of brought into geology from the side by a friend of mine who gave me a geologic guidebook to Big Bend National Park. And I fell in love with the park. I fell in love with the rocks. So then I graduated to the professional paper, and I couldn't even read the first paragraph of the abstract because it used a bunch of words I didn't know. So I got a geologic dictionary, which helped a lot because it defined a bunch of words I didn't know in terms of even more words I didn't know. So decided I had to go back to school, and from my first day in geology, I was hooked. And well, that's pushing 50 years ago.
Wow. So let's get into, I guess, your thesis on mining in regards to its importance to infrastructure. About everything you're doing, including our conversation right now, is brought to you by treasure hunters like yourself finding these precious minerals. So talk about how you feel.
Well, if you boil it down to the simplest terms, everything we use is made out of stuff. And the stuff is either grown or mined. And so my focus has always been on finding the earth resources that we need for the things that we use as a civilization, and find them in large enough quantities in concentrated bodies so that we can get what we need with the minimal impact on the rest of our world.
Yeah. So I guess you made a name for yourself, certainly in Mexico. You found a lot of silver there. So I know that's a special place to you. So why don't you drill into what really floats your boat in Mexico, and give us some stories and some big scores. People want to hear about the big score side.
Well, first of all, Mexico is the place to be for silver. 25% of all the silver mined in human history has come from Mexico. And when you look around the world, there's about 15 districts that have produced 1 billion ounces or more of silver, and 8 of them are in Mexico. So not only is Mexico where to go for silver, Mexico's where to go for big silver. And if you start working within what we now recognize as belts of deposits that are all produced by, they're sort of the inevitable result of plate tectonic activity, which we've only really understood since the mid-70s. Once you understand those belts, you can start looking in them for the things that were overlooked, because not just Mexico, but the Western US and a lot of the rest of the world is covered by dirt or bean fields or corn fields or just younger rocks that mask the deposits. And until recently, we didn't really have the tools to look for them, nor did we have the economic impetus for doing that. So we have that now. And we've taken some of these regional concepts and gone looking between the big deposits that have been known in Mexico. They've been known since within 100 years of the conquest in 1522. But we've gone out, we've recognized where the missing pieces ought to be. And lo and behold, some of them are there. And some of them are big deposits, like what we found in the Fresnillo district with Mag Silver, the Juanicipio project. Fresnillo is the world's biggest known silver deposit. And, we found a missing third and maybe more or less in sight of the existing mine. So people go, well, is there more to find out there? And you go, yeah. And the old saw is the best place to find a mine is in the shadow of a mine. And that's one of the things that we've done.
Yeah, you said something back a minute ago here about the tools. Let's compare the tools here. You dated yourself a little bit. You've been in the game a while. So talk about from when you got going then, but even previous to what it did with the old boys. If they had all this science, has this really improved things? Shouldn't we have more discoveries? But talk about the advantage we have now versus the old school.
Well, the old guys, and by that I assume based on your phraseology that you're talking about people who are at least 20 or 30 years my senior, very few of whom are left in the business. Even if they had the tools we had now, the real key to the whole thing is the understanding of plate tectonics, which emerged in the 70s. And that turned geology into a real science. I mean, plate tectonics gives us something where we can project and we can predict where things are going to be. So that gets you focused in the right kind of area. And then you can bring in the high cost geophysics and various other kinds of techniques that we have today to try to look through the cover and see the stuff that doesn't just stick out of the ground. Because prior to my time, most discoveries were made simply by following something that stuck out on the surface and following it to depth. And, that allowed prospectors to go out and find stuff. Most of them have been found. Now, they didn't necessarily recognize where things were big versus where things are small. And so we can still use a lot of what the prospectors did and put it into a new framework and apply new tools and come up with new discoveries. But it takes a combination of the science plus the technology to make the discoveries we're making now. And it takes the will. It's expensive. Exploration isn't cheap. So you gotta have a strong enough story to get people to back you to the tune of millions of dollars. And you better be right, or at least be wrong for the right reasons.
Yeah, to my next point, seems like I guess the question would be: when should a company just admit defeat, throw in the towel, accept it is what it is, move on to a new target? It seems like a lot of these projects just continue to get drilled, and it's such a low success rate business. I'm just wondering about the viability of it being a really good investment. I know this is our business and all, but when should guys throw in the towel?
Well, that's going to vary from company to company and depends on the model that you're using to explore a system. But, we work with something we call Archie's rule, which says You got to be able to recover twice what it's going to cost you to mine it. And so that gives you a clue to what kind of grade you need to be finding. In other words, what's the unit value of a ton of rock? If it's not twice what it costs you to get out of the ground and get the goodies out, then you're wasting your time, because there's all these economic components. So, the stuff the accountants talk about: amortization, depreciation, depletion, all of those things. Plus, you got to be able to make a minimum of a 15% after tax internal rate of return. And so you add all of that together. And so if it costs you $100 a ton, you have to be able to recover 200 for that project to make sense. You can take that 200, you can translate that into the metal price for whatever it is you're looking for. And if you don't start seeing in your initial drilling and in your work, you don't see numbers that fit that, then it's time to move on. Now, that doesn't mean people are going to do that, but that's a very simple rule of thumb that not only should companies be using, but investors should be using. So if you look at from an exploration standpoint, if you're talking to an exploration company and they're talking about their results, and the results only translate to $100 a ton value, and knowing that they're talking about mining, say, in the United States or Europe, where mining costs are sky high, and it's going to cost them $150 a ton to do it, you go, no, I'm going to invest in another company. Or if you've got a company that has a mine and they're talking about their mine grade and what they're recovering, and you're looking at that and you're going, well, that's not really twice what it's costing them. That's 20% more than it's costing them, or something like this. You go, okay, that's a marginal operation. And the simple answer is next, and just keep going until you find companies that are doing it that makes sense, in a way that makes sense. So anytime I look at a property, first thing I do is filter it, see whether it will satisfy that basic metric. And if it doesn't, it's move on to the next thing, unless there's a whole bunch of geologic indicators that say people have just been looking in the wrong part of this system. They've read it wrong, and they've accepted geologic ideas that go back, accepted wisdom, call it that. And you go, how can I look at the accepted wisdom? Is it sensitive to something? Can I pull out this block in the Jenga tower that is the model that people are promoting for this district and go, it all falls down. The pieces look good. Maybe I can put it back together in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I've got to imagine here you can pick and choose what you do in your career. So let's get into your current day treasure hunting activities. Your time is valuable. So get in. Obviously, you've got a lot of silver behind your name. So I know you're working with MAG there, but run through what Peter Megaw is doing on a day-to-day basis.
Well, most of what I do is MAG because we're building at Juanicipio what is on track to be the world's biggest primary silver deposit. I mean, we produced 1 million ounces of silver in July off what is essentially development material as we're getting the mine ready to produce. So even diluted as development material is, we still were producing at 567 grams. That's almost 20 ounces a ton. That's higher than pretty much any other, with one or two exceptions, silver deposit mines in the world. And that was diluted grade. But 1 million ounces in a month, running at what is essentially half of what our annualized rate will be when we get the mill going to 4,000 tons a day, that's better than 20 million ounces of silver a year at very high grade. So that's huge cash flow for us and our partners, Fresnillo PLC, who are the operators. So, that was a fun discovery, and it's going to make a major impact on the world silver supply. 20 million ounces is a lot. I'm also working with Reyna Silver, the company you talked about. My daughter is the IR person for Reyna. Their two principal projects in Mexico are projects I generated. The project in Nevada is a project that's basically taking the model of the carbonate replacement deposits that are so prevalent in Mexico and carrying them into the US, where they used to be major targets, but haven't really been for a number of years. And so this is one that we think has all the earmarks of a big system. Doing the same thing in Alaska with Western Alaska Mining, working with New Pacific for huge silver deposits in Bolivia, Relevant Gold, looking for big gold deposits in Wyoming, again, based on the plate tectonic models that we now have that show that Wyoming used to be attached to the southern part of the Abitibi gold belt in Canada, which is one of 200 million ounce gold production historically. And so over the last 2.5 billion years, what is now known as Wyoming, which used to be off to the east, got calved off and moved and rotated and is now Wyoming. So tremendous potential, gold all over the place, lots of little old historic peckings, but nobody ever put the pieces together and say, aha, there's a big system here. So that's the kind of geologic idea that gets me out of bed in the morning. Because if you find it, it's big. And it's not just finding a small mine or the next stope, it's finding the next district, maybe the next ore field. That's fun.
You're an elephant hunter. Let's be straight about it. No, yeah, you're also with Prismo there, right on the edge of Vizsla there, and again on to some more massive stuff in Mexico.
Yep. With Vizsla,
yeah. So you're a fan of discoveries, Doc. What other areas are obviously Nevada, Mexico, and you touched on Wyoming. Any predictions of where the next big one might come from?
Well, not necessarily being specific, but the next big one is going to come from where people are doing good science and are well enough financed to be able to chase the deposit and follow up. You're not going to make major discoveries with one or two holes. They may tell you you're in the right place, but it's a lot. Investors should understand that even if you found an ore deposit tomorrow, it's going to take you 10 to 15 years to put it into production. So this is a long-term kind of operation. And it all depends on what the commodity is that you're talking about. Because we've got all of these metals that we need for alternative energy. And silver and copper, of course, are the two most important ones volumetrically. We need small amounts of specialty metals, and obviously we need a fair amount of lithium for batteries and things like that. But none of the energy transmission, none of the computers and things like that make alternative energy work without silver and copper. So the demand for those is going to remain and is going to get better. And it's a question whether the world can keep up with that kind of demand.
Yeah, that was another question. Is this new green revolution? By every metric I've seen, it's unreasonable. It's unsustainable. There's no possible way there's enough minerals in the earth to shift everyone to electric cars. So I guess, yeah, talk about the business itself. The junior mining sector right now is certainly downtrodden, coming off the summer, but metals seem to be at reasonable prices to exist. But this inflation kicker is really getting in the way here. So I guess talk about how you see the overall vibe of this sector.
Well, I've just come from, I wasn't able to be at the Silver Symposium, unfortunately, but I've just come from the two fall conferences in Beaver Creek and Colorado Springs, the Precious Metals Summit and the Denver Gold Group show. And, the vibe is, everybody's waiting to see what happens with what the Fed does with interest rates and what happens with inflation. But this is nothing new. I mean, for young pups like you who didn't live through the inflation of the late 70s. I mean, I bought my first house with a 17% mortgage. So, people are talking about unprecedented interest rates and unprecedented inflation rates. And it hasn't been this high since 1985. Well, in 1985, those numbers were on their way down, not on their way up. But the point isn't so much that historic perspective as it is, if it takes you 15 years to make a discovery into a mine, plus however many years it took you to find the mine in the first place, you want to look for something that's high enough grade that it's going to make money under any economic condition. So you want something that is clearly such high grade that it's going to make money when silver price goes down, when inflation goes up. And so you can sleep, the investors can sleep at night. You can sleep at night knowing that you're covered on the economic side, no matter how things go. And big enough to last a couple of market cycles. And typically metal market cycles are 7 to 12 years. So you want something that's big enough to have a mine life of 20 plus years. And, you go for those metrics, and you're going to be comfortable with your investment. You're also going to be comfortable knowing that your investment, if it's successful, is going to produce enough of those metals to make a significant dent in that demand that you were talking about. Because the earth is not running out of metals. The crust of the earth where we live is just loaded with metals. It's a question of what the concentration is. And you want it as concentrated as possible, because that's what we call high grade. But then the alternative to that is bigger and bigger holes in the ground to get out what we want. Ultimately, if people decide that that's what we want to do, that's what we'll do. What you have now is this conflict between, in many cases, the same people telling us we have to shift to alternate energy, and on the other hand saying, oh, but we don't want any mining. Now that's what's incompatible. You can't. It's not cheap being green. It's not easy being green, but it's not cheap being green either. And the amount of metals that are required for the green revolution is substantial. And we could potentially achieve that, but we do need to go into it with our eyes open as to what the environmental and other costs of doing that are. Because just because sunshine is free or the wind is free doesn't mean getting the energy out of them is free.
True story. In fact, I think a lot of those green energy programs have larger carbon footprints than the standard oil and gas. So, well, Dr. Peter Megaw, Chief Exploration Officer over there at Mag Silver, and certainly your hand in many other projects. I guess I'll leave you with one final one, Daka. What's give investors here a little guidance here? This is a tough market. They like to treasure hunt too. It's an exciting game. But what's if you had a couple tips on is it management team? Is it prior victories? How would you choose a mining company?
Well, I mean, I do pick mining companies all the time, and just to begin with, a high tide floats all boats. And we've just come off a number of years of a high tide where projects of almost any stripe, including some of the ones you referred to, the vampires that have had the stake pulled out of their chest and repainted and put up in front of the public for the 47th time, and people invested in them. All of those were floating. And then the plug got pulled out of the bathtub here about 5 months ago. And everybody, the good, the bad, and the ugly, are all lying at the bottom of the tub. So there's tremendous opportunity now. You can buy major dividend paying stocks at knockdown prices right now. How much lower those prices go or could go, I don't have a crystal ball to tell you that, but I can. They're there. They're on sale. So look for grade, look for size, look for management team, look for the political jurisdiction that the place is in, and then talk to the people. The companies all have people who will talk to you, and go to the shows like the Silver Symposium and meet the people from the company and talk to them, ask them the questions about, does this look like it's going to make sense? And then just punch it through your filter. That is it big enough? Is it high enough grade to make sense? And make your decision based on that. But do your homework. Don't listen to gurus. Don't listen to me. Just do your homework, but focus on grade, people, size, and it's a garage sale out there right now. So have fun. It's much better than buying stuff at Goodwill.
True story. Okay. Dr. Peter Megaw, he is the Chief Exploration Officer of Mag Silver, and again, his hand on a lot of other pies there. We're certainly going to track your success. I really appreciate you spending the time here and hunting hidden treasures here. And this guy's been doing it a long time, and I'll look forward to seeing you hopefully at the next symposium and keeping our eye on the progress of your company. So, Doc, thanks again for the time.
A pleasure, Rob. Take care.